friction is the thing that is killing a lot of companies today in terms of their customer experience. If you can remove that layer of friction through having better intelligence, more machine learning to get from the right customer to the appropriate agent, you win.
A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Hey, welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. My name is Ethan Beute. I'm the host of the Customer Experience Series, or the CX Series, here on the show. And I'm really excited to share this conversation I had with Brian Gilman, the Vice President of Product Marketing at Vonage. The primary theme in this episode is friction, and specifically how to reduce it in order to improve customer experience. We talk about the shift in control away from businesses and toward customers, the difference between marketing and selling products versus marketing and selling solutions. He's got a lot of strategies for selling layered and verticalized solutions. We talk also about competitive intelligence, how to gather it, and how to build processes around collecting and delivering competitive intelligence, and how video and artificial intelligence can work together to reduce friction for your customers. Honestly, I recommend listening to this episode twice because it's so dense with great information. I hope you enjoy it. Brian, welcome to the Customer Experience Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. We'll start with you where I start with everyone, which is customer experience. What does it mean to you? What are its characteristics? How do you think about it?
Yeah, the way that we think about customer experience here at Vonage, I think, has been an evolution. When you look at, you mentioned my previous lives at Avaya and Polycom. I think the customer experience has really changed. I think historically, customer experience was about, let me flip out the number of channels with which my contact center can serve you. And it was always a very business-driven experience. And for a long time, I think that really satisfied the needs of most. But in the past several years, I think that the market has really flipped on its head. And customer experience now is more about serving the customer's needs in the channel of their choice. And I think a lot of that is being driven by social media. A lot of that is being driven by video. A lot of these new tools and solutions that customers have, that they're communicating with themselves, whether that be college kids communicating with their parents, or, with my kids don't talk to each other on the phone anymore. They talk to their friends over their Xbox. And so the expectation of how they want to interact with one another is now carrying forward to the business, and the businesses who are evolving are succeeding. Those that aren't are falling behind.
I love it. I think something relatively unique that you've offered here, I've asked it to dozens of people now, is this very explicitly, it has been business driven. What does the business want to do? How does the business want to dictate what the options are? And customers have a lot more power than they did before. They have a lot more choices than before. And so there's an evolutionary layer to it. Just to follow up on that, what are some of the things that a forward-looking company might be doing in order to accommodate the customer and to meet or exceed those expectations that are now more important than ever?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we look at the leaders in customer experience today, you're looking at companies like Amazon. I'm probably gonna kill one of my answers for later in the podcast, but a company that I always look to is Domino's. Domino's is historically a pizza company, but they're not a pizza company anymore. They're a technology company that happens to deliver pizzas to people. I think that when you look at companies and how they're having to evolve, the average retailer isn't competing with the boutique down the block anymore. They're competing with Amazon. The local credit union or community bank, they're not competing against one another anymore. They're competing with Chase, Bank of America. And these are companies that are providing next generation self-service solutions to their customers. And so if I'm not being dealt with in the means that I want to be dealt with as a customer today, I'm going to go to the guy down the block. And the guy down the block, once again, is only down a virtual block. It's not a literal block anymore. And you're going to go where your needs are best served. So today, the companies that are evolving, that are looking at how can we change where the conversation is taking place? Before we started the podcast today, we were talking about the fact that I don't call my kids' cell phones anymore because I know they're not going to pick it up. But I know that within 30 seconds of me sending them a text message, I'll get a response. The companies that are thinking through these challenges of where can we serve the customer better? How can we solve for first call resolution when a customer calls with a complaint? Sometimes that may be coming in over video and not having an audio conference at all. It may be solving their challenges. Think about, to me, customer experience always has to do with context. And experience without context really is meaningless, because while we're having at the communications level a very generic conversation in some form of communication, that form of communication is going to look very different, whether it's a doctor speaking to a patient, a teacher speaking to a student, a high net worth advisor speaking to their client. And so you have to look within the realm of what is the context with which that dialogue is taking place. The companies that are really addressing that challenge first and foremost are the ones that are going to succeed in today's and tomorrow's economy.
Great. I heard in there a lot of really good and interesting ideas. The one I want to double back on is this kind of self-service piece. Just from your perspective and your experience, can self-service be truly personal, or is it just personalized? Talk a little bit about that relationship there. Personalized being I'm teed up with options based on my past behavior or whatever. Personal being there's actually a human representative on the other side or a human touch of some kind. Talk a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah, I get asked a lot about this question. I've been on panels where they've asked, when will the robots take over? And I think that where we're at right now, we're at a point in time in terms of a technology evolution where AI and machine learning are really helping the self-service experience, where you can now have a bot of some sort interject between customer and business. And on certain levels, there's a certain level of intellect with which that bot can serve self-service needs. I want to track a package. I want to cancel an appointment or set up an appointment. These are all things that could very easily be self-served. The way I kind of look at it is you have your very easy transactional behavior, and then you have kind of like those moments of truth. A customer buying a couple buying a first home, someone settling an estate for a deceased loved one. More complex interactions, which will then require a face-to-face interaction, where I think that you start to talk about self-service. I think that AI and machine learning can help direct the call so that you're not dealing with going from agent one going, oh, you wanted an international flight. Let me put you over to Sally over an international. Having to, I think you solve for a lot of the friction within the communication. And I think friction is the thing that is killing a lot of companies today in terms of their customer experience. If you can remove that layer of friction through having better intelligence, more machine learning to get from the right customer to the appropriate agent, you win.
That's great. I like the human examples you shared there, where there is some level of empathy and comfort that a human can provide during a difficult or complex or potentially intimidating experience. This is great. So I've had a ton of sales professionals, marketing people, customer success folks, some executives. I think you were the first product marketer, especially at an executive level, to be on the show. So let's talk just for a few minutes about product. Like, what is the role of product in the customer experience to someone that maybe isn't working in a software company or a company that has a title like product marketing? What is product and what is its role in the customer experience?
Sure. Well, I have the worst named title coming into this podcast and this is actually something that I joked with my company's CEO when I was interviewing. When you look at the technology today, and most of this technology is now sitting in the cloud, product is kind of this antiquated terminology. We don't have boxes anymore that we're going to go deploy on-prem. We have platforms. We have solutions. And so the way that I look at how product starts to impact is, one, how easily can I get it deployed within my network? But two, and the cloud brings with it a lot of benefits like APIs. So APIs take on two forms. So Vonage bought a company called Nexmo, which is our communications API platform, which allows us to do embedded communications. So think of your Uber app, think of Airbnb, where you can embed communications into another form, whether it be your desktop or your mobile app. But with that, there's also more simple APIs where now one platform can hook seamlessly into another platform. So as companies start to grow, they start to bring in, Salesforce or Zoho or Sugar CRM or even G Suite. And you can now start to take your technology or your product and hook it into these other productivity platforms. So for every dollar that a company is going to go and spend on a communications platform like a Vonage or one of our competitors, they're probably spending 5x, 10x on these other productivity applications, which is all part of this whole digital transformation. Another term that we like to throw around that everybody has a role in somehow. The product needs to work and interoperate in terms of impacting customer experience. What do I mean by that? You have a company that's dropped 5x what they're going to spend on their communications platform on Salesforce. They have good, rigorous training. They're implementing Salesforce appropriately. Their sales team is entering all their information. But every time they have to make a phone call, they're entering in all this information by hand, manual. From a productivity perspective on the employee side, incredibly inefficient. And then take that to the next level. An inbound call comes in. Forget the sales guy calling out to someone and having to enter in that call. Call's now coming in, and I have to go look up that person after they've come into my call. It's highly ineffective. So having your product be able to seamlessly interact with all these other productivity applications to drive a certain level of intelligent interactions within a business, one, improves the employee productivity, but two, creates a better customer experience where they're no longer having awkward wait times or having to be handed off from one agent to the next, because that's all dealt with seamlessly through the interoperability of those two products.
And in that setup, of course, removing the friction that you described before. So you're a product marketer, or at least by title.
Solutions marketer. Let's just call it that.
Okay. Okay. Solutions.
It's really hard, so we'll go here too.
Yeah. What are, one or two or three layers or levels down? What is the day-to-day success metric around product marketing? What are team members of yours doing day to day, and what does success look like in terms of marketing your solutions and your products?
Yeah. So I hope I'm not an oddball in saying this, but every product marketer that I brought into my team, there's been a couple of characteristics that I specifically look for. And part of this is predicated on some of my history and roles that I've played in the past, where I need people who are technically savvy, who can handle the day-to-day product marketing, work with product management, work with sales enablement, to make sure that as products are brought to market, they're responsible for the go-to-market activities. They're working with the demand gen teams to create robust marketing, to drive leads, top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel. Okay, that's great. But the one characteristic that I've begun looking for, and I've been very deliberate about, is finding people who've had some level of vertical market expertise. So my background, I started off my career in finance, and when I first started into marketing, you brought up Polycom earlier. It was to lead a solutions marketing function, which was, help us not sell boxes anymore, because boxes were killing the video conferencing market. We would go and sell a company 6 boxes so that Joe CEO didn't have to travel from New York to London to Hong Kong. We'd go back 6 months later and say, let's sell you 6 more boxes. And they'd say, nope, we're good. What? It didn't work? Nope, worked flawlessly. Picture quality is fantastic. The boxes are being used 5% of the time when I don't have to travel. It became an issue of, that solution sell. We didn't really understand what their needs were, whether that be interviewing and recruitment, distance learning. If it was a doctor, how do doctors look at things like telemedicine, not only within the walls of their network or their university, but we had one of our primary customers was delivering telehealth services to oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. Person gets injured, it costs that company $40,000 to medevac them off of that platform. You have the ability now to see face-to-face to a doctor. You're now solving for bigger challenges, which drives adoption and utilization. And adoption and utilization is a thing that will kill anybody in the cloud today. I can go and buy all of your solutions today. If I don't use them, you're very easily replaced because you're in the cloud. I'm not making a massive CapEx investment in your product, which kind of ties me into a 5-year amortization before I can rip you out. So to me, it's bringing people who have some form of vertical expertise as well. And as this company and as we are transforming our business, my team can evolve with the business to say, that going back to experience without context is meaningless. We're going to bring a product to market, but we're going to tell you how does that work for a doctor trying to help a patient throughout the patient pathway, not just from the time the patient gets into the doctor's office, but in terms of post-care treatment, whether that be my company's ability to send SMS to a patient whose prescription needs to be refilled well after they've ever left the doctor's office. Because as a doctor, I want to make sure that you're no longer being readmitted into the hospital, because I'm going to start getting penalized by insurance companies. These are things that we need to start to think through. And all of those workflows are different, albeit from, once again, that generic communications level, they look the same. So I always look for that added level of expertise. So that way, as we get smarter and we work more with sales, they need to know the product, but knowing that when they go to speak to a credit union that they can't use the word customer because credit unions have members. Really important things that let them know that we're a trusted advisor. We understand their business, and we're going to be able to sell a more robust portfolio to them.
I got so many places I could go with this. That's such a great passage. I want to get into the multiple product portfolios. You already mentioned Nexmo and how you and your team manage that. But I want to stay right here where you just were, which is there are subtleties, nuances, product-based, solution-based that the sales folks need to know about so that they can really speak in a meaningful way to prospects and customers. What does that look like for you all? How are you communicating this? How are you getting this information to salespeople?
Sure. So I'm going to deviate a little bit. I'm actually going to answer your first part of your question, which was the multiple product lines. So one of the challenges that we've had here at Vonage is we're a company who's grown through acquisition, a lot of acquisition. We bought Nexmo. In the past year, we bought TalkBox, which was a video API platform, which we've now tied into to fill out our API capabilities. We bought New Voice Media, a contact center company. So we now have the three legs of this stool, unified communications, contact center, and then your communications API platform. I'm going to bring this back to an answer in 1 second. But what you've now done from a sales perspective is you've taken 3 different sales forces, 3 different types of buyers who would normally come to us. You're going to have your Ubers and Lyfts, or your digital natives who want to build their next generation capability, their mobile app. They don't really have a need to transform their contact center or their UC platform today. You have your company who's looking at upgrading from their on-prem PBX into a cloud-based unified communications platform. And then you have your contact center company, business. All different personas. They all have different needs. It's a very challenging environment for sales to, one, get their arms around everything. Oh, and you have to know the vertical markets as well. Well, what I'm not trying to do is verticalize our business. And what do I mean by that? Where we're going and creating very specific vertical solutions. That gets to be, you get into a lot of rat holes when you get into certain vertical markets where you have to deal with regulatory and compliance issues. You have to go and get certified for different things. And there are things that we are tackling. We just announced high trust certification in the healthcare space. There are certain table stakes that you have to have. But from a verticalization perspective, we're not trying to do that today. What we're trying to do is to show customers that it's a lost opportunity, especially as a marketer, for me to just go and create a demand gen campaign against our UC capabilities or our contact center capabilities or our API capabilities, because I'm going to hit this universe of customers And 2/3 of them may not be interested in what I just sold them or what I was trying to sell them, because while I'm selling them a UC campaign, they may be interested in contact center. They may be interested in APIs. That's where I think verticals come into play, because I can now tell this entire story about the patient pathway. I can talk about from the moment that they come into the healthcare network all the way through to the time that they're discharged. Same thing with finance, with retail. The stories are much bigger and more relatable when you start to talk about the customer experience. And if I can go into a customer and say, yes, we can sell you this today, but have you thought about? The point is not to go and get the entire, to swallow the whale today, because you're never going to get a company who has a dedicated budget today to go buy everything that you're trying to sell them. But one, you're giving them a pathway to something that is going to be more advanced. Two, you're telling them that there are very few companies in the space who can tackle all three of these things. And then three, you're future-proofing their business. And you may open up an opportunity for them to say, I didn't know about you in the contact center space, or, oh, I didn't even think about APIs. Yeah, of course I use Uber, but how does that impact me? We're storytellers at the end of the day as marketers. And wherever there's an opportunity, we need to be storytelling. And so we need to be robust about what we're talking about. We need to be specific about the target audience with which our campaign may be focused on, but we need to open eyeballs up to a greater universe. And we need to use real life case studies. We need to use a better narrative around a vertical market application. And I think that's really the challenge that we have, because we are threading a needle sometimes, where you're trying to do a lot around a lot of different products and telling a very concise story. But when you can tell these great stories around these moments of truth that I talked about, you're bringing emotion into a play, and emotion is a very good motivator for people to go and buy.
Yeah, the other thing there too that's kind of baked in is, I'm going to bring you in on this, but we have all these other solutions. And once we're a trusted partner, we can go ahead and proceed as appropriate over the coming months and years, where we can help future-proof your business.
Yeah.
So,
just 1 second. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's difficult because, historically, Vonage is known as a residential voice company. And so a lot of times we're not even brought to the table for all three of these things. And so we're overcoming the hurdle of being a B2B business company, where the overwhelming majority of our revenue is coming from, but nobody knows it. And so you have to open up some of these doors, because one, people think of you as a residential VoIP company. And if they think of you as a B2B company, they think of you as a micro B2B company, as, residential plus almost. And so you have to open up these stories that people think of you in that vein.
That's great. So let's go back then to where we went down the multiple product pathway. And again, how do you communicate this? And I ask this because it's a challenge for us, from a software development, a product development, management, marketing, even CS and the feedback loop into sales, like communication. At a really high level, the communication between teams is so critical, so that, a sales rep who might be the second or third touch of anything that's being communicated outward to the prospect and customer base, they obviously need to be informed and to manage expectations and to see all these opportunities, for example, that you offered with the 3 legs of the stool. What are some tactically, what are some mechanisms or tools that you all are using successfully to make sure that your salespeople are aware of these opportunities and the state of affairs and where things are going and what they can say and can't say, shouldn't say, et cetera?
Well, so I'll take this from an organizational perspective, and I'll take this from more tool training tactics. So because of the different buyer personas and because of the very different customer journeys from which they would come to a company like Vonage, we've separated our business into what we call our API group and our applications group. So the API group is more of that developer-led journey of digital natives who want to go and play with APIs and build their next generation communications tools. And then we built out our applications group, and our applications group is the contact center and unified communications portfolios. And the reason we broke it out that way is we're seeing a massive acceleration now in terms of how people are buying both contact center and unified communications. It used to be back in the day when it would be rare that you would see a company go and buy joint seats. The cloud is driving some of this now. Through our acquisition, having all of this technology under one roof, we're seeing now, 1 in 2 deals now looking at joint seat opportunities between UC and contact center. So cross-training the sales teams for UC and CC, clearly in a space where we have to be at the forefront of that, because in terms of that Venn diagram a while ago, they were just kind of touching. We're now seeing like this. So that cross-sell training has to take place, but it's not a huge leap for a sales guy to have that unified communications and contact center discussion, because a lot of times they're almost inseparable. And if they're only having a UC conversation, they're still having the conversation, well, how do you integrate within my existing contact center? So they're having a lot of those discussions anyway. Tactically now, what we've done is, from a sales enablement perspective, we've implemented CCS training, which is, is a solution selling methodology with which all of our sales guys are getting trained. Is to ask the questions. It's to go in without your pitch deck, but to have, those very specific conversations to their business, to have a really good understanding of what their challenges are before they go in and, undersell themselves. From it's on the marketing team then to make sure that we have competitive intelligence pretty well cinched up, because we're going to be running into a much larger multitude of competitors, where if you're dealing with two different industries instead of one, how do we get our guys comfortable with our UC competitors as well as our contact center competitors? Oh, and by the way, there's a whole slew of net new competitors that are coming down the pipe, and every day. So it's making sure that those tools are available. It's making sure that as we bring new campaigns to market, that we're training the sales teams to let them know that we're training our BDRs for inbound leads. If we're doing outbound dialing, that it's my team that's sitting down with those teams and giving them the verbiage and the scripting that they need to have those upfront conversations. It's a lot of work, but as I said, when you boil it down into those two groups, as opposed to trying to do it all under one umbrella, it makes it a little more manageable for people to understand. And yeah, every group is trained up to have those questions asked. But if all of a sudden there's a big API lead that comes in through a UC deal, we make sure that we're bringing in the right people, whether those be SEs or other sales teams from the other side of the house, regardless of which side it comes from, to make sure that we're covered.
That's great. It's really helpful. It's so fun talking with someone like you who's got a great deal of experience in a much larger organization, because, you've already walked through a lot of the things that we're trying to figure out. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited to do the show and to have guests like you on. It's really helpful and interesting. So thank you for that pass. That was really great. You actually touched on something I wanted to ask about, which is competitive intelligence and market intelligence. Is something you have a great deal of experience in. What's its primary role? Is it, and how is it structured in the organization? Is this just something that happens as part of the process, or you have people dedicated on these tasks, and then you find ways to roll it into other communication throughout the organization? What does competitive or market intelligence look like as a function inside an organization like yours?
In every company that I've been at, this has probably been one of the more difficult challenges we've had to go and solve, because no matter how much competitive intelligence you do, your sales teams will never be happy with how much competitive intelligence you've done. You're going to give me competitive intelligence on our A prime competitors, they want 12. You do 12, they want 20. So due to limitations, I don't have a never-ending budget. I don't have teams of people within the product marketing organization. We have finite resources to go and do everything that we're saying. And so we've done a couple things. One is we've agreed upon with sales leadership the core competitors that we are going to go and build out battle cards and scripting against. And we said that we would keep it at, depending on the competitor, a certain cadence of updates. That is something manageable that I can divvy up in and amongst my team, myself included. I own competitive intelligence. I own certain competitors that I keep an eye on as well, because it's all hands on deck when you have a market that's moving as fast as ours is. We've also gone and deployed a competitive intelligence platform. So it's something for us to go and manage in terms of doing a lot of the heavy lifting and putting in information. But there are things that we can automatically set. So I can put page links into the platform, and anytime there's a change on a competitor's pricing page, I'll get an alert. And it may be that they just changed some of the words, but it may be that they had a wholesale change of how they price out their platform. Things that give us better intelligence. That way we can be a bit more or drive a bit a faster speed to market than we would otherwise. Because quarterly, every 6 months, you would think that quarterly would be enough, but it's not in this market. And so anytime that you miss something, you're always going to get called on it. So bringing some level of automation into CI has been a big help for us. And also having an ear to the market for those next competitors. As I said, this market is moving very aggressively. There are large companies. Everyone wants to share the desktop. And so whether it's a CRM company that's looking to move into the contact center, or it's, everyone's always looking to have the phone as well as the productivity apps. It's going to shows, walking the floor, meeting with analysts, talking with people that you may never have a conversation with in your life again because they work at a competitor, but you hide your badge nice enough that they're willing to talk. It's anything that you can get just to make sure that things don't slip. And no matter how much you do, you will always miss things. But as long as, there's an agreement and a set upon course for how you're going to deal with CI, you'll at least win more battles than you'll lose with your sales teams.
It's great. I want to go back a little bit to video, but maybe to the softer side of it. You gave that great example of, and I think you were at Video at the time, right?
I was at Polycom for 6 years and then at Video for 2.
Yeah, so I'm thinking specifically the story you just shared of a medevac being $40,000 to get the person off the oil rig versus telehealth, video conferencing. So there's the obvious practical side of it, but can you speak to like the human side of it? Like, why is video going forward such a valuable part of customer contact and customer communication, not just from an efficiency standpoint, like I can put my face in front of anyone, anywhere, anytime, as long as we both have an internet connection and a device, which every device is a video device at this point. But talk a little bit to the human side of that as well.
Yeah, so I think that video does a lot in terms of the emotional, I'm using emotional loosely, but the emotional side of a customer experience interaction. We brought up the telemedicine, we brought up, the doctor patient, but take a contact center agent who's having to deal with volumes of calls. That person could be sitting within a financial institution. And I'll give an example from when I was at Video. One of the challenges that a credit union that I used to work with had it was a small credit union. I think it was like 40-ish FTEs. They had spike periods of traffic in their branches. And what would happen a lot of times is you would go into the branch, you would go and speak to the person behind the desk who may be a year or two out of college, the guy who does your withdrawals out of your account. You'd ask them a question about a mortgage or whatever, and they would hand you off to a 1-800 number because they didn't have all the answers. They weren't a specialist in whatever you were asking. It's a very cold experience. You get routed through a dialer. And what this credit union said was, every opportunity that person leaves our branch to go and call a 1-800 number is a lost opportunity because they're probably equally as likely going to go call Chase or Bank of America or whoever down the street. So they started putting in video kiosks within the branch. You now have a face-to-face interaction, and there's proven studies about the effectiveness of having a face-to-face interaction in terms of close rates from, how much it drops from in-person to video to voice being the least common denominator. So you're getting the emotional feedback. So whether or not I'm really upset with you because of something you just said, whether I'm happy, I can gauge that interaction a little bit more. So you're getting the physical nuance of the conversation that, we can somewhat derive out of an audio call, but I can physically see it over video. And these are more on the basic interaction side. When you're now dealing with the ability to take video and expand that into the fields of like field services where my internet's down, you're going to try and deploy a truck to me a week from now. Well, if you take your phone and the camera on the back of it, let's go look at the back of your router. Oh, that wire's out of place. You fixed it. You're solving for issues that are causing me emotional distress. And when you have the amount of kids that I have in my house, the internet being down is an emotional distress. So it's, how are you solving for my issues in that face-to-face interaction, or sometimes the ability to show what I can't verbalize to you because I'm not technical and I don't know what wires are coming in and out of my router. And yet, sending a guy a week from now isn't going to solve my problem. These are the emotional connections that we see a lot with video. And I still think that the more extreme, extreme use cases, but beyond face-to-face interaction are still in their infancy. You look at telemedicine. Telemedicine is really starting to take form now, and I think is being driven now from outside factors outside of the medical community, primarily insurance. Insurance is now going to reimburse for telemedicine engagements. They are now going to penalize doctors for readmittance back into hospitals of patients. So if I'm a doctor and I can get on face-to-face with you to check in on your diabetes protocol, several months after you've left the hospital, and I can check in on how your diet is. These are things that are now going to solve for challenges well above and beyond just being a phone replacement. Because honestly, if we weren't over video right now, we would pick up the phone and we would do this over audio. The experience wouldn't be as good, but we would solve for the majority of what most podcasts look like today. So it's solving for the needs above and beyond replacement of a phone. That's where video is filling the void. And I think that the faster we get there, customer experience will start to really shift leaps and bounds.
It's fantastic because you went straight to where I spend almost all my time thinking and working and teaching around video, which is largely unscripted, unproduced, unrehearsed, just true person-to-person communication with a little bit of show and tell mixed in as well as necessary. So good. Hey, relationships are our number one core value at BombBomb and here on the podcast. So I always like to give you, and thank you again so much for your time and your insights. It's been awesome. I like to give you the chance to thank or mention someone who's had a positive impact on your life or your career, and to give a mention to a company that's doing customer experience really, really well.
Okay, so I've had a little bit of time to think about this. I think the one person in my career that I would thank actually goes way back to my first job in marketing when I was at Avaya. A woman by the name of Sophia Williams. She was the vice president of marketing that I reported up into. She's the first person who beat it into my head, this concept of big M marketing, and that marketing is not just a lead gen team. They're not the ones who just build battle cards and data sheets, but marketing has a seat at the sales table. Marketing has a seat at the finance table. Marketing has a seat at all tables. And while they may not be the lead voice at those tables, to always have that optic of, marketing is as close to the customer as sales sometimes more so. They're definitively closer to the street than product is and finance. And so it's always been a help in my career in orienting myself to that North Star of, are you thinking big and broad enough about how marketing plays in this world? In terms of companies that are doing customer experience well, I'm spoiled because I get to watch net new companies come into market with very cool applications every day through our Nexmo APIs. I look at companies like Uber and Domino's, and I kind of see, yes, there's a lot of failed ways to go and order a pizza, but every other day it feels like you're watching another Domino's commercial, and it's like, I would never order a pizza that way, but I'm inspired by the aggressiveness with which they want to sell me pizza. Yeah. It's something that in terms of companies that are pushing the limits, in terms of companies that are, I think, really kind of pushing how far customer experience can go. Those are the ones that I always look to, and who would have thought a mere 3 years ago that you'd look to a pizza company as where you're going to draw your technology inspiration from. It's when you look at two really simple things that we used to do without thinking about it, hailing a cab and ordering a pizza, and how far that's really changed. I'm inspired by those types of companies every day.
It's outstanding. This has been an absolute pleasure. I love everything that you brought. I know folks are going to find it valuable. If someone wants to follow up with you or with Vonage, what are some ways that they can connect with you or the company, Brian?
Sure. Me personally, you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Twitter. I believe my handle is bgilman13, 1L. People always miss that. If they wanted to get in touch with Vonage, they could reach us at vonage.com. And if they wanted to learn more about our APIs, they can also go to nexmo.com. They can reach that through vonage.com as well. But a lot of developers like going straight to the Nexmo website.
I love it. What I learned about Nexmo was one of many, many really interesting things here. If you enjoyed this conversation and you want more like it, you can always subscribe to the Customer Experience Podcast. You can find it at bombbomb.com/iTunes, bombbomb.com/Spotify, bombbomb.com/podcast. We're everywhere that you would want to listen to a podcast. Brian Gilman with Vonage, thank you so much for your time today. Hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm inspired by the aggressiveness with which they want to sell me pizza. So much good stuff from Brian Gilman in that episode. If you enjoyed it and you want to hear more conversations like this one, I encourage you to check out the Customer Experience Podcast. You can find it by searching the Customer Experience Podcast wherever you prefer to listen to your podcast. You can also see video clips and meet some of the guests a little bit more personally through video by visiting BombBomb.com/podcast. That's BombBomb.com/podcast. Thanks again for listening.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.